or shirts off or anything.
All right,
Straight
guys.
up.
All right, we're live. Episode 12, guys.
12.
Thanks for joining us today on, this is an even dozen. So it's not a baker's dozen, but it's just a regular dozen.
It's a good dozen.
It's a good dozen.
Episode 12, not season 12.
Yeah, right.
Does that mean we're going to get a box of donut holes for the next one? For
Yeah,
Baker's
right.
dozen?
Yeah, baker's dozen.
That
Yeah.
sounds pretty good. We need props. We haven't had any props in a while.
Yeah,
Edible
we haven't had
props.
props since the baseball bat.
Yeah.
And then Mac talked about, you lost your prop, or someone stole your prop.
If they did, I'm gonna get another one for a future topic on the show, though.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, but you were
so-
picking it up off the street, weren't you? Wasn't it like
I was
a barricade?
doing the guy a favor. He's going to get a ticket.
Oh, okay.
I think episode 13 ought to be a little show and tell. We should have
There
the
we
show
go.
and tell thing.
A show and
Okay.
tell
Yeah.
for episode 13. You guys heard it
Absolutely.
here.
Yeah.
That's right.
So what are we
Mac,
going to talk about
so
episode 12?
yeah, Mac, you're the one this week that had the idea for the topics and that you sent everyone. So I'm going to turn the list of the topic off to you, and then we'll kind of toss it around between the four of us.
You know, one of the things I was thinking about yesterday is, trying to think of some topics for the podcast was what are some of the really important things that you should ask your builder or your contractor, whether you're an investor or a consumer. What are the good things that you might want to ask right up front before you make that commitment?
Yeah, that's pretty strong question there, because I think we could go on for hours. So then why don't we try to narrow it down here? If we just go off with a kind of a headline and start there, and then dive deeper into each little headline.
Well, didn't we, in our discussions earlier, we felt like there were really two topics or two areas of topics that almost everything addresses, and that was communication and expectation.
True.
Yeah.
Over the years, I look back at all the problems that I've seen that have occurred in home building, and almost always you can trace those back to one or both of those areas, either poor or no communication, or just poor or no expectations being set with the customer and with the builder or the contractor.
Yeah,
You guys agree?
I think at times like this, when you've got this is kind of a unusual time with prices going absolutely crazy, that communication both ways, from builder to client to client could be investor, retail purchaser, just that flow of information back and forth, because as we're finding out, it changes weekly. Like this is
true.
Right.
we started this pricing conversation. Gosh, it must have been back in like episode 3 or 4,
Yeah, from the very
And,
beginning, we've talked about increasing prices.
Right. And what we thought was a, price increase back then to now.
We wish we could go back.
Yeah,
to
we
then.
wish we could
Those
go
were
back.
the good old days.
Those
back
were
then.
the good old days.
Good old days.
And just think, 12 episodes, it's probably been 14, 15 weeks since
Right.
that, first one
Yeah.
of where we were at that point in time, pricing to now, and what's happened in the marketplace from then to now.
Right.
We couldn't even, there's no way, if you ask us back then to forecast this. There was hints of it, but man, it really, really took off. And I would say at least there's some, I feel like over the last couple of weeks, at least some plateauing going on. It might not be the absolute resting spot, but at least it's not as sharp of increases.
I had a builder tell me this was the first week he did not receive increases in the mail.
Yeah.
First time since the first of the year.
Yeah.
Well, we've noticed just tracking it. It's kind of bouncing around the top of where it is. So lumber still, as a commodity, is trading at an extremely high number.
Right.
But it is, for the lack of better words, it's starting to hold a little steady there.
Yeah.
So any stability is welcome, even though if it's still high cost of materials. Stability is welcomed because it takes that. Some bids are only good for 48 hours. I've recently been in those conversations. Well, now you are seeing a little bit of a time frame in between having to check on pricing and things like that.
Right.
And what happens, Mac? I mean, I know that up front we're talking about what do you do? How do you address your builder or your contractor And one of the questions that we are advising them to say is, what happens when prices increase? How do you communicate that back to me?
Yeah, that's great question. And, and that's something that, again, I think you need to get out on the table right up front, because somewhere in that builder or contractor's contract, they're probably going to have a paragraph that is called the material and labor escalation clause, or the force majeure clause, which essentially is an act of God clause. It's a survival clause for the builder, the contractor, that if you have insane increases in a very short period of time, in many cases that can absolutely wipe out your builder, your contractor. They can be upside down in a heartbeat.
So what's the resolution? Let's say that the builder comes to you and says, I'm going to have to raise your price X number of dollars. What is the resolution? What is the customer's resolution to that?
Well, again, that goes back to what is written in the contract, and I think that's why it's so important to ask about that right now. I mean, that clause has been in builders' contracts probably since home building began, since attorneys were involved in the industry. But the problem is that, or the good news is that we've never had to deal with that.
Yeah.
I've been doing this 41 years. You guys all been doing this for decades, and have you ever
Week
had
or
to
two.
Week or two, yes. Long weeks. Has anybody
Leap
ever,
years.
yeah. Has anybody ever had to discuss that clause before, up until
Never.
the last couple of months?
Never.
I don't even think after Harvey, if you remember, we had a tremendous increase in our
good point.
cost after
Right.
Harvey. I don't believe the builders addressed it with the customers at that time, the customers that were already on the books.
Right.
New customers coming in, we raised prices, we explained why,
Yeah.
but did we go back to our existing customers and have to have that difficult conversation?
I think
don't
this is
recall.
the first time in history that it has gone up so much, so fast.
Yeah.
We've
Well,
never seen anything this rapid.
And it costs across the board. Like when we have a specific event, like a storm come in, there are you know what's about to happen, especially with sheet goods, with plywoods and OSBs and things. But we're seeing almost everything across the board. PVC and copper is one thing. So many things are made out of copper. So electricians are coming in with like, hey man, my copper's costing me. I got to charge you more for these next couple of homes or whatever. And then carpet. Last time I heard, it was like I was going to get an increase on flooring costs, it was coming down the pipe.
Yeah.
So it's across the board, and when all of that hits at one time, and a builder goes to a client and says, "Hey, I've got all of these extra costs. It's going to raise the price of your home $50,000." Those are that's frustrating on both ends. And it just you can communicate and you can show and do that. It really just comes down to is the decision of whether the builder wants to go through or whether the client wants to go through, to be honest with you.
Or is able to. In some cases, the builder, and again, it's human nature to want to take that frustration, that anger out on someone, and the one in front of you typically is your builder or your contractor. And in many cases, again, in all cases in this situation, who would have ever seen this coming?
What we're really all dealing with, and client, builder, everyone in the market for a new home or existing home, right? So you're basically looking at your replacement cost. And I've had this conversation with people, when they're sitting in your house or model home or, whatever it is, that you're basically sitting in an accumulation of commodities. Everything in this house, is bought and sold on a commodity market. It changes every single day, and it typically doesn't go down over time. Right, that commodity price is climbing over a period of time. This is the only time that I could ever see that where all of them, if you were to take a commodity chart and look at all of them, the graph is always, like this steep curve up. Usually it's one or two things.
Right.
Randy, you were talking about like carpet, and people look at carpet and they're like, why is the price of carpet? Well, it's made out of petroleum. It's made out of oil. Well, oil's up, carpet's up, right?
And and Justin, one time before you made a comment, which is very true, the things that we buy, not only are they commodities, they're manufactured items.
Yeah.
So when you buy an appliance, that's something that was manufactured in lots of pieces. Carpet.
Right.
All the different aspects of carpet that go together to make that carpet.
Yeah.
Right.
And because of everything that's happened in the world recently,
Yeah.
the factories, the suppliers,
You take
the
someone
fabric.
like you mentioned on appliances, and let's say, copper is up at any point in time. We've had plenty of times in construction where copper prices go, through the roof, right?
Right.
Well, the appliance manufacturer doesn't raise the price of his appliance because the amount of copper in that appliance is pretty minimal. They take it on the nose, and they've got a kind of pre-planned price increase anyways coming around like twice a year. They always give us price increases.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like in there. But when all the materials in something go up, they have to pass it on.
And the ability to produce it. I mean, think about it. There's a shortage for appliances. There's a shortage of vehicles.
Labor.
The labor doesn't exist today.
Right.
And that's why
there's so many factors that all came together, creating a perfect storm. It's what I call a hangover from last year, and we all know what caused that.
Yeah.
And and again, with people staying at home and working from home, remodeling, I mean, is at an all-time high. People decided, hey, I'm going to be spending a lot more time here at the house, so why not improve my...
But look what it did to the workplace itself. Like commercial, a lot of these big companies said, well, gosh, a lot of these guys can continue to work from home.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they are working from home, and they're like, well, if I'm going to work from home, I better have like an office or something like that. And and people are looking to change their work because now they're at home a lot more.
Right.
I need a different space to work in or do this or accomplish this.
Hence the increase in demand for appliances. People remodel their kitchens and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So all that being said, what's the question the client needs to ask the builder for that situation?
Well, I think there's a few things that need to be asked. Number one, they need to say, hey, how do you handle that situation? Let's talk about your material and labor escalation clause or your force majeure clause. So
and what does it look like over the time period that I'm dealing with you?
Exactly, and that's another a great point that I had here was let's talk about timelines because as much as every builder wants to meet a schedule or beat a schedule, most builders prefer to be a hero instead of a zero.
Right.
And
they want to underpromise and overdeliver instead of
that's the way it should work. And most builders are going to be that way. But again, if you're the consumer, if you're an investor or customer that's looking to build a home or a project, you want to really make sure that your timeline is matching the builder's timeline.
Yeah.
Because right now, with the shortages and breakdowns in supply chains, normally no builder is going to guarantee a time frame.
Right.
It's just simply impossible. So, you need to get that on the table and discuss that up front. Again, it goes back to expectations.
And make it part of your standard meeting with that builder. If you establish up front, most builders should ask their buyers, how should I communicate with you? Is it through email? Is it through text messages? And how frequently would you like to hear from me? Is it once a week, every other week? In that way, you have a control of your schedule, so they don't just show up when you're waiting for an inspector or you've got someone you've got to speak with and you don't have time to spend with them.
Yeah.
And so at the same time, include that item in their checklist because we get as builders notifications on a regular basis of up and coming price increases.
Right.
Yeah.
And so force the conversation.
Yeah, that's opening the mail now.
Yeah,
It's
on
like,
a regular daily basis.
They're not sending me a thank you card.
Why is that?
It's as awfully early for Christmas cards.
Well, like you get an email from a trade, and when you're waiting on information on something, and you see emails come across, oh yeah, I'm getting that, whatever I want, but it's from a trade that you're not expecting anything. You're like,
oh boy,
I know what this is.
Can't be good.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
This can't be good. Another thing too,
due
guys.
to the current situation of.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, another item that ties into all this that, again, you really don't ever have a chance to talk about and don't need to talk about is substitution of materials.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Equal or greater value. That's another line item in most builders' contracts, and normally it's not an issue. But
I've used,
today,
of the things, like I've used that one several times just from unavailability of things that come up, through the years. I can think of 3 or 4 times when, things have been short and you've had to go out there and get the alternative, instead of Hardy Plank or some brand that you're looking for, and you have to substitute another brand because there's something going on with their manufacturing or their pricing or something like that.
And sometimes if the builder's on top of his game and he calls up to order a material, if he's got a good relationship with his supplier, sometimes they'll be able to substitute for him a better grade.
Right.
They'll give you a better dishwasher or a better piece of siding, whatever
that's
it is.
Usually what happens in that case, like anytime that's come up, it's I've had people asking, it's equal to or better value. Usually when it's a short like that, it's usually someone giving you kind of an upgrade for free, just to handle the situation.
Right.
It's not typically because it just doesn't exist in no matter what you wanted to buy.
Right.
But then again, think about it, because if the builder, superintendent, contractor, whomever you're speaking with, they've got a million things happening on the job site every day, and they're going to forget things. So take it upon yourself to say, I'm going to ask Randy today, by the way, have you got any price increases coming my way that you've been notified of? Have you had to substitute any of your items?
Yeah.
Is there a change in the schedule? Are we still looking at that September 25th date when my son's getting married and I need to have the wedding in the backyard? And so talk about those things, because communication is the key.
Yeah. That's definitely, it's the opportunity to be the hero, it's also the opportunity to be the zero. So,
and that's where the frustrations come in, because building a project, whether it's for your home, usually on the commercial side, there's not as much emotion built into the project, but that's where a lot of the frustrations boil over between builder and customer.
Yeah, and sometimes when it comes to substitutions, a lot of it depends on what's happening on the job site at that time. I've been in situations where, hey, I don't know if I'm going to have this particular thing ready when you need it, but that's still like 2 or 3 weeks out. I'll just say, hey, well, hang on to it, see if something comes in. But if they call and they say, hey, I don't have that specific size Paralam beam that you need, and that's what you need to finish the roof framing, but I've got a glue lamb that's a half an inch wider and a half an inch taller.
Right.
I'm like, send it. Just send it. Get it done, because that's a critical part, trying to get the house dried in. So you just send it and then explain it later and said, it's oversized. It exceeds what was designed for, but you make that decision right there on the fly and just go absolutely send that, and then it'll work. And
I think, as we said earlier, as long as you're communicating, setting proper expectations, following through with the customer, you've earned the right to make those decisions on behalf of the customer, because they know you're looking out for their best interest.
The what I think a lot of purchasers don't understand is that that as far as communication is the number one goal for anyone building an investment project, a custom home, a production home, doesn't matter what it is. The goal to get it done as fast as possible is not the homeowner's goal. That's the builder's goal.
Time is money.
Right? Because I've had to have that conversation many, many times, is that there is no one that wants this project to go faster than the builder, right? It's the old thing is time is money. Well, the more of these that we can condense into a year, the more money I make. So you get the byproduct of being aligned with me in that we both want this to go extremely fast. And every time it slows down, it doesn't necessarily cost them money. See, it always costs us money when it slows down.
Yeah, it's
right.
It's like you do get those questions like, well, you guys are deliberately delaying this project.
No, I'm not deliberately lighting dollar bills on fire and throwing them out the window, right? So that's not where you're never deliberately trying to slow down. We're always at the mercy of Mother Nature, suppliers,
That's right.
Things out in the market like we're dealing with now. So there's never a reason to go slow. There's always a reason to go faster. And any opportunity that you can take to shave off or reclaim a day, it's hard to reclaim weeks, but you can reclaim days. Weather delays and stuff like that, just from efficiencies and stuff like that. But once you start losing weeks because of rain, something we're experiencing now. I saw the other day, it was like 17 straight days of rain.
Oh, I know.
If we get any more rain
Like,
out here, this is ridiculous. You got parts of the country that can't get any rain, and we get it all at once.
It's like mold growing on the cat.
Yeah,
It's like
exactly. So, in a typical construction schedule, you have days for rain, but not weeks for rain. Right. And so that just costs money.
Yeah.
And yes, it's frustrating when someone's waiting for something to be done, but
And that brings up a good point. You have people that say, well, the home is almost finished. You should be able to move me in next week.
Right.
Well, there is this little thing called the final grade.
Right, exactly.
Getting your final inspection in.
Occupancy and
It's like
inspections.
a CO, certificate of occupancy.
I know the home's been complete for 3 weeks, but it's rained for 24 days.
Right,
So,
Right.
So when you're meeting with a buyer and setting expectations, what do you find is the best way? Is it to put it in writing? Is it to give it to them again and again. As we know in sales, you have to tell them what you're going to tell them and then tell them and then remind them what you told them.
Well, I'm not going to tell every builder out there how to conduct their business, but I can tell you what has worked well for me over the years, and that is putting it in writing. I have an expectation sheet, a process and timeline sheet that is 5 pages long, and it actually explains the steps in the process.
Yeah.
And as you guys know,
Yeah.
home building is a process.
It's a process.
And you can't go from one gate. We'll talk later.
Yeah.
I'll share that with
Map
you later.
that out for us, man.
He needs a copy of your process.
Yeah,
list.
there you go. There you go. I don't think so, but no, I think that's what I have done for years, and it has actually prevented a lot of problems.
And so I think in talking to our customers and our clients, we should educate them and say,
Sure.
ask your builder to give you something that educates you on the process.
Right.
Keep that line of communication open.
Right.
Whether it's something in writing, whether it is a checklist, whatever the case may be, have something so you know what's going to happen next.
Well, that conversation will end up being the most important one you have because let's all face it, we can have clauses in our contracts, but nobody ever refers back to that until there's a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Very good.
the expectations discussion and sometimes, you know, if you're doing it right, there are certain discussions to have and go, hey, here's where some things you can do that messes this up, and here's some things that I can do that
Right.
messes this up.
Right.
As long as we both know that these things could potentially happen, here are the expectations laid out. That ends up being the most important conversation in the beginning.
And it brings up a point I want to bring up for the customers out there, that it's very easy to forget that your contractor, your builder, actually is a human being.
Yeah.
That they have families, they have a life outside of work, and there is a tendency sometimes, especially when you know you're a customer and you're dealing with all the stresses at home and you're under the gun time wise. It's easy to just completely wear that builder out.
Yeah.
You know, not respecting any kind of time frames, you know, sending text, phone calls at 9:30 at night. So again, that's one of the expectations I think that needs to be discussed.
It is, and
early on.
I've heard builders use the reference. Would you call your doctor on a Sunday afternoon at 4:00 if it wasn't an emergency?
Yeah.
And we don't get put in that same category, unfortunately. You know, we're thought of less than that.
I
profession.
explained it many times to, you know, really the people coming in that you're dealing with, if they're, you know, working at a job or have a large company that they work with, there's a phone system and there's a hierarchy of, you know, information that flows from their company to their customer. And in this situation, you know, builders are pretty small. I don't care if you get the biggest builder out there, the chain of command from the salesperson to the top, that's a pretty short path versus, you know, a Fortune 500 company that, you know, has a corporate office that's 55 floors tall. And, you know, it's a pretty short path right there. So just setting that standard that, hey, my cell phone is also our business phone. And so I know you have the urge to reach out at Sunday at 9:00, but, you know, that's where I see communication break down from a buyer's perspective, you know, investor's perspective. They're thinking that, you know, it's a 24/7 hotline, and it's not.
That's a absolutely perfect point because, and also too, I like to point out to customers that rarely in any type of product that you purchase, rarely do you have unlimited access to the assembly line.
Right.
And building a new home, it's sort of like an assembly line.
It is.
And
It's like having a Subway sandwich made in front of you. That's the only other place.
I mean,
you see something manufactured right in front of your eyes.
And one of my good friends years ago told me, and I've always loved this statement, he said, you know, building a home is like making sausage. He said, you know, it can be kind of a messy process, and if you ever saw it being made, you probably wouldn't want to eat it. Well, you know, basically, if you go out there every single day, you're going to see all the ugly stuff. But again, the builder, you know, it's hard to make sure everything's pristine on an hourly basis.
Yeah, you go to a manufacturing facility, and especially today, you see on TV some of these manufacturing plants, and they have painted floors, and it's immaculate, and everything's happening, you know, right there where it's supposed to happen. You know, this is off-site manufacturing. Like, we picked this location over here, and everything in the world is going to come here and get assembled here.
That's it.
And there's no lines.
It has
there's
been raining for 24 days.
Yeah, and you've got neighbors on each side, and you know, There's all kinds of things to deal with right there, and there's nothing dedicated for the manufacturing process there. So if you go to a factory, everything is dedicated to handle the manufacturing process. There's a spot for the guys to go have lunch. Right? They don't have lunch in the car while they're building it, right? Yeah. He's not eating his Subway sandwich, putting the dash in, going, Bob, the cup holder's not in yet.
They lean up next to one of the robot machines for an hour and eat and take a siesta. Right? Yeah, they don't get that.
Yeah, and I often say too that the homes are built by humans for humans.
Yeah,
and humans are going to make mistakes,
right.
So you have to cut them some slack because they're doing the best job they can.
Yeah,
they wouldn't be out there. They wouldn't be dedicated. They didn't care to satisfy their customer.
Yeah.
But they're humans.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could actually have a comedy special. Actually, one of our episodes could be just nothing but comedy, talking about the weird things we've seen on job sites.
And the expectations that have been set.
Oh, yeah. Surprises we've all seen on job sites with the customer.
One episode we do need to do that. We need to have like a ranked of crazy animal stories. I've got I can 3 or 4 good animal stories that I could throw out there that I think would be good.
I can tell you a story about a skunk I had to lure out of the house that was stuck in the fireplace, inside behind the wall behind the fireplace. Let me tell you the key.
It wasn't a pet skunk.
It was a real skunk, and it was peanut butter. He followed the peanut butter. I called, and I had to tie a string onto a spoon with peanut butter on and lure him out of the house so he would not spray peanut butter.
That could be the most valuable tip that anyone could gain from this podcast.
This was a finished house too.
Yes. Yeah.
Ooh, with a skunk in it?
Skunk in it.
Can you imagine a skunk just full on in your house? No.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that'd come out.
I still remember what a squirrel that is trapped inside the wall. About 8 weeks later, I can tell you what the result of that is.
I mean, you substitute that for a stray cat or whatever.
Or a mouse.
It's when you get the bats and the bees, that's when it gets real interesting.
Yeah.
Again, save all that
Save
stuff
all
for
that.
another episode.
Loose deer in the house. That's a bad one too.
Hey, let's face it. Some people act like wild animals too on these job sites.
Oh yeah,
that's true.
Had a few of those.
That's the sausage making side of it.
Exactly.
Well, guys, next week, when we get together, we'll definitely take a look back at. I think a hot topic out there is just kind of the keeping our thumb on what the cost in the marketplace is doing, and until that becomes a non-topic, I think we should at least dedicate some time to, identifying what's going on. Because as we look back to the first episode to now, I'm not sure I have the confidence to say what at this point it's like. I feel like there's at least some leveling off, but in my gut, there's no going back down, right?
Yeah.
So the going back down, I'm just hoping for level off right now and not skyrocket. So.
And something we should also include in that conversation is not just the cost from the commodities perspective, but also supply and demand.
Yeah.
Because that's really a significant factor, that there's not enough supply today to satisfy the buying demand.
And maybe next week we can kind of take a look. So out in the financial markets, the Fed came out there and actually, admitted that there's, over 4% inflation going on. And that's just what they admitted. So, I'm like, it's that's just the consumer price index. And, that can be manipulated. So, but that's 2% higher than any year that they want, right? And so that just means, your $100 last year buys $96 this year. So we're seeing that in the price of homes. So maybe we can have a conversation a little bit about pricing, but you're eroding purchasing power a little bit too. So that's episode 12, guys. I think we kind of got a segue to next week, and appreciate everyone joining us.
And I'm glad to be back,
also,
by the way.
Next week, are we getting the slideshow presentation from Costa Rica?
I can very easily bring that. I'll be happy to do that.
You'll have to tell us your story from Costa Rica to Bali.
To Bali.
Bali, yes.
It was quite a trip.
It was quite a trip. And it wasn't as far as you thought,
It wasn't
right?
as far as I expected, no.
You were underwhelmed.
You were underwhelmed for...
I was overwhelmed by what I saw, but I was not overwhelmed in the flight. Yes.
Great.
It was quite a trip.
Welcome back, Perry.
Good to be back. It is good to be back. Missed you guys.
All right. Sounds good. All right. We'll see everyone next week.
See y'all next week.
Have a good one.